How's it going, Mr. Runap? This is my submission for the final assignment on Let Your Life Speak. I chose option number 2, and the first branch of that question asked, has this experience been spiritual in any way? And for me, I think it definitely has in a lot of ways. I remember one of our earlier classes, we highlighted the difference between a spiritual person and a religious person, and talked about how our spiritual person doesn't have to be religious and vice versa. And for me, that was a really important class because growing up, like, my family's not religious at all, and they didn't raise me to be religious. So we never went to church, and, when all the holidays came around, we just focused on, like, the getting presents at Christmas aspect of it, not the spiritual side of it, or no, not the religious side of it. So for me, when I knew that there was a difference, I realized how there is a lot of experiences in my life that are spiritual. So during this quarantine, a few things that have been spiritual are, the first week of quarantine, I spent a lot of time reflecting on high school, because when that school got canceled, I kind of knew that was it. I haven't really been optimistic about this whole situation, so when I got news that we were canceling for a while, I was like, okay, that's probably it. So I took some time to just reflect back on the highs and lows of high school, thinking back to, like, freshman year, all those funny classes, and just, like, all the funny moments that make high school high school. So that was really cool. I found that spiritual, hitting up some friends, reminding them of those experiences and having some fun, like, looking back on it. That was really cool. I've been listening to a lot of music. We've talked about music a lot in this class and how spiritual it can really be. So I've listened to a lot more music, like different types of music, a lot of throwback music, really, like songs. I remember, like, there was, I don't know if you know The Fray, but my dad listened to that a lot. So it, like, sparks a lot of memories. Like, we had, like, a trip to Virginia when I was, like, 7, and, like, that's all that my dad listened to on that trip. So it kind of, like, brought back a lot of those memories. And I think, yeah, like, the first few weeks of quarantine, it was just reflecting, like, not only in high school, but just, like, life in general. Like, all of us seniors on kind of a turning point in our life from high school to college. You could say from, like, adolescence to adulthood. You could definitely say that. So for me, that's been definitely spiritual. And then, I've also been listening to, like, a lot of podcasts, which is not as spiritual as music is, because you can't really interpret a podcast, I guess. But I think it's definitely been spiritual in a way that it helps me, like, not think about the virus, right? Like, I listened to a podcast by Joe Rogan about aliens, right? Like, I find it really entertaining, and it helps just kind of take a step away from reality, basically. And I found that spiritual. And then also, I have a friend in my hometown. We've known each other for, like, 7 years. And, not even just this quarantine, just in general, like, we always FaceTime together every day. And then, like, on the weekends, we would FaceTime until, like, 3 or 4 in the morning. So we've been doing a lot of that during quarantine. And I found that very spiritual, just because, it's kind of like the last ride, right? Like, when we go off to college, if they're open next year, we're not going to have the opportunity to be able to FaceTime like that anymore. So I've been kind of, like, cherishing these moments a lot more than I would, just because this quarantine kind of reminded us how fast things can move and how fast things can change. So I think with this quarantine, it's definitely allowed me to have, like, this upcoming summer, we don't know the extent of which we're going to be able to, like, do stuff, but even if it's just slow quarantine, like, taking, or cherishing, like, the time spent with my friends, and just kind of, like, the small things. That's one of the things I realized in this quarantine, how important the small things are, how important just driving to school one day and stuff like that has been. So I think that's been good. And then a little bit of another thing I've been is, as we all have, spent a lot more time with our families just because everyone's home now. So yeah, doing puzzles. My family has, like, a putting green in our backyard. So my dad's been doing a lot of landscaping work there. So I've helped him there. Like, pulling out roots, stuff like that. And I kind of find it spiritual just because, like, our family never really spends time together. We have a college student with my brother. I'm a senior, and my dad works a lot. So we're all kind of on the move. And, like, in day-to-day life, at the prep, for example, right, it's just kind of, you're always just kind of doing something, right? During school, you're obviously doing work, you get home, do homework, maybe you go, like, work out, or you have a sports practice or whatever, and then you go to sleep, right? Wash, rinse, repeat. So you don't get a lot of time to, like, spend time with your family. take a step back, like I talked about reflecting. So I've definitely found that spiritual. The second part of that was, it was similar to the first part. I think maybe I misread the question, but talking about spiritual experiences, and I kind of took it as, has any experience been more spiritual than another one? And for me, I remember like the most spiritual experience I had, it was the first day, no, not the first day of quarantine, but the first time where like the weather was good. The weather's been pretty bad, but it was like one of those nights where it felt like summer. And I remember I played basketball at like 2 in the morning, right? I did this a lot as a kid, and I just listened to music, and I found that like it was almost like meditation. I don't know how to describe it, but it was really spiritual, and it helped me like just kind of chill out and just go day by day in life. So that was easily the most spiritual experience I've had during this quarantine. I'm definitely going to keep on doing that, just because that's what I've done in general, just in life. Like if I'm ever stressed out, I just go and play basketball, because it's like a de-stressor for me. So, when it was like 1:30, it was a summer night basically, and listening to music, that experience kind of was, it helped me a lot. Third part of the question was, have you seen / felt or found God, purpose, belonging, or just like storytelling, that type of stuff. So I can't speak on the God part just because I'm not religious, but the purpose part I can speak on, because I've had a lot of time to think, as we all have, and going into college, I'm right now undeclared for major, so like I gotta figure that one out soon enough. So I've definitely spent a lot more time not thinking about necessarily like, should I major in this or should I major in that, more focusing on like, what do I want my life to look like out like after quarantine, right? As we that TED Talk, the first one that we watched about like the pillars, I'm pretty sure one of the pillars was something, being a part of something bigger than yourself, and during quarantine that kind of gets removed because you're not allowed to be in a group. And I feel like going into college, I definitely want to do something like that. So I've looked into different like club sports or intramural sports, or if there's any opportunities getting like being like a manager for like a sports team or anything like that. So for purpose, like it's not necessarily like my vocation when like trying to figure out what I want to do. It's just kind of trying to figure out what I would like my life to look like, let's say a year from now, and how I can kind of like backtrack and make sure that I kind of follow through with those wants. So like, let's say, I want to be a part of like a group that brings out the best of myself. Okay, let's do some actual research and see if that can happen, right? So I've been doing a lot of that. And for storytelling, telling my story, I think it's not something that I've thought about a lot. I don't know about other 18-year-olds, that's not really something that comes up. But I think this will kind of be something that all of us seniors can kind of turn to, kind of like 9/11. I mean, it's not as bad as 9/11, but just kind of a way where we can all like focus on, like where were you when quarantine first happened, or what did you do during quarantine? So I think that will kind of, it's helping with telling my story, just because during high school it hasn't been like a movie or something, right? It hasn't been all ups, right? So I think this is kind of like something that I can look back on and tell people like, yeah, it actually wasn't that bad, and this is why. And I'll talk about that in the next question, or the last one, which is like emerging from this. Do you have a better sense of yourself? And it talked about Parker Palmer's depression, his stint with that. And I think the most important part of the book was when Parker Palmer talked about how a lot of people, when they're in depression, they try to look up, and how instead they should look down to try to find like the roots. Pretty sure that's what he said. And I think that we can do that here. Like everyone's trying to look for, like sports right now. Everybody wants them to come back and stuff like that. But for me, I've been kind of just thinking about like the simple tasks of life and trying to highlight those. And the reason why, back to the storytelling part about how, I can talk about this experience. Throughout high school, I feel like the points where I faced the most adversity are the points where I've like had a better sense of myself and I've become a better person. So like, for example, the whole quitting basketball thing, you've heard a lot about that. That was a great example where, I quit, and it was kind of like a low point right after. It was kind of like, dang, this kind of sucks. But now looking back on it, that was a great decision, and like I'm better for it. Another one, not necessarily a decision, but last summer, I got appendicitis. So I was basically in quarantine for 6 weeks because I couldn't work, I couldn't really do anything. So like during that experience, it sucked. But again, like coming out of it, it was kind of the same thing that we're all learning now, how you can't take things for granted. And when you have the opportunity to do something, just do it. So for me, that helps me a lot because, like during this year, I'm like, yeah, I can finally work out again, or I can finally work again, or I can finally play sports again, right? So it was just kind of that aspect of it. Well, it sucks right now. I think we're all going to look back on this and be like, I learned this during it, and now during my life, I don't take this for granted, right? And I think that's really important. I think we should all, like, honestly, for me, like the way I think about it, right? My entire family thinks it sucks, which is understandable. But for me, I just kind of think about like how much worse it could be, right? Like I don't know anybody close to me that has or has been in contact in it, which is great. And then also like I feel like it's kind of unfair to compare like me living out my days as a senior to like someone literally losing their job. Right? I'm lucky enough now I don't have to deal with money. I don't have to worry about like my income, right? I just have to worry about like grades and stuff like that and going into college next year. So while not being able to like live out my final days isn't the best, I think it could be a lot worse. I think it's just a good way to be more optimistic. But yeah, those are my answers to the question. I hope that I didn't misinterpret the question. And yeah, stay safe. Thank you.